The purpose of a system is what it does. It's a simple enough aphorism, but one that is very useful. It's about focusing attention on the outcomes of a system versus what the outcome is supposed to be. A good example of this would be zero-tolerance policies in schools. Zero tolerance is the policy of drawing circles around certain behaviors and punishing them much more severely than they previously had been. To quote an APA study on the matter, zero-tolerance policies assume that removing students who engage in disruptive behavior will deter others from disruption and create an improved climate for those students who remain. A simple concept. Extremely harsh punishments will deter unwanted behavior more than just normal school-based punishments. But that's not really how it works in the real world. I mean, kids aren't exactly logic-based, they like Mr. Beast. That same APA study found that zero tolerance had not actually accomplished that, and in fact had only managed to make school discipline harsher on minorities. Taking our new idea of the purpose of a system is what it does, the purpose of this new system of school discipline is not in fact improving discipline and safety. It appears that it is about punishing minority students. You can see the attraction of using this idea. It greatly simplifies the examination of a system by reducing it to outcomes and quantifying them based on expectations. Now, not everything can be examined in such a teleological way. The actual mechanisms of how something works needs to be examined and studied, and not every outcome can be easily quantified. But if you are looking at a situation where someone is being misleading about their intentions, there is no better rejoinder than, the purpose of a system is what it does. Anyway, let's talk about why State Senator Jake Hoffman is trying to kill the Clean Election Commission by running a fake census.
Essentially, we want to ensure that citizens are those who are counted for the determination of representation here at the legislature. So the U.S. Census Bureau has been politicized, unfortunately, by the Obama administration and the Biden administration. And they have not required the citizenship question when it comes to the census that's taken. It's been, many members of Congress have pushed them to. There are questions as to whether or not they are legally required already to do so. However, due to politicization, they've decided not to. I think that is a travesty. I think that when it comes to who represents the people, it should be U.S. citizens only in that count. That way, when we set the apportionment per district, we are taking into account legal, lawful citizens only. And then this bill does have a funding mechanism, so it's not, like we're asking the IRC to do something without providing them the funding as well.
Okay, that last part about funding is the important part, because everything else that came before that is bullshit. Absolute and complete bullshit. You can tell this because of how detailed he was when he was describing why he wanted it, versus what happened when it came time to describe where the money was coming from. It is the difference of, Obama and Biden rigging the census, versus, I got money from somewhere, don't worry about it. The funding mechanism Jake Hoffman is so hesitant to even mention is the Clean Election Fund. Senator Hoffman wants to raid the Clean Election Fund to pay for his statewide census. The bill sweeps around $5 million a year from the Clean Election Fund to the fake census fund, which for the last year we have numbers is around 90% of the revenue the fund takes in annually. So this is a naked attempt to kill the commission. There is literally no other explanation for the bill. Yes, he talked about running a separate census for drawing legislative districts, but come on. $5 million a year isn't enough to fund a census of Maricopa County, let alone the entire state. It is a fraud and a charade, window dressing only. The proclaimed census isn't real. The point is to rob the Clean Elections Commission and stop the work they do. And I'll get to that in a minute, but let's cook the census idea first. There are lots and lots of problems with this proposed census, but the number one problem is it's not needed. It's not needed. There's no need for an adjustment currently to the state legislative districts. They are very well drawn. This isn't a 2018 Wisconsin State Assembly situation where everything is just horribly gerrymandered, where one party wins the popular vote in legislative elections, but only manages to get a third of the seats. No. That's not the case here. In Arizona, the legislature reflects the popular vote. That's a good thing. In the last election, the Arizona Senate almost perfectly reflected what the popular vote was. The Princeton gerrymandering project rated Arizona an A for not being gerrymandered. What Jake Hoffman is trying to solve currently is not a problem. Also, excluding citizens from drawing districts will not change the final vote total. I want to emphasize that. Whatever changes Jake's census makes, it will not change who votes. Everyone who votes before the census will be able to vote after. The number of voters will remain the same. The only thing it will do is rearrange the districts a little. And those districts are already more or less perfect. But to move on to the final nail in the coffin, and this is the real sticking point, this census is so impossible, it is best described as impossible, especially when it comes to the budget. The U.S. Census takes a fortune to conduct. Now, it's well worth every penny, but it's not cheap. $5 million a year is nothing. It will not come anywhere close to the cost of conducting the census. The 2020 census cost $13.7 billion to conduct. The unprofessionalism of doing it on this budget is laughable on its face. So unserious that the only way to treat it seriously is to ask someone how it is possible and wait for the explanation to fall apart like bread and water. Oh, so you're just going to send out mailers to houses? So we're excluding people who move frequently and homeless people from this count. They are citizens too, you're not going to count them? Are we going to count prisoners in this count? They are citizens, but not ones that are allowed to vote. Hey, where are we going to count them as living from? Their prison addresses or their previous addresses before conviction? By the way, you plan on excluding non-citizens, right? How? What's going to stop people from lying on forms? What happens when you get 80 million responses in a state that has 7 million people? How are you going to do any of this stuff? And a million other questions. But do you know how State Senator Jake Hoffman dealt with questions in a committee hearing on this bill? He just talked over it, just yacked.
As you highlighted, very much in question.
Senator Sunderation, just quick question to that point.
But that's the role of the U.S. Census to determine how the people within the United States are
my question for you is,
counted,
are you
which also meant that Arizona loses out on so much federal funding.
And do you know why we lost that opportunity? We lost that opportunity.
Like what happened was states properly counted the people
Senator Sunderation,
in their states.
I don't believe
for needed services that people need in this state.
So
right?
let the record reflect then.
That talks about counting the people in the United States. That is the job of the U.S. Census.
I do appreciate
federal law that now Arizona would suffer.
One of the follow-on effects, Senators.
Mr. Chair, your SCR here does nothing to impact how California or New York conduct their censuses. All it does is wastes a lot of Arizona's resources.
Senator
and
Sunderation
puts us at a deficit when it comes to counting our own population
in
and
fact,
accessing federal dollars
for
all of these other things. But Mr. Chair, that's not what's being discussed here. What is being discussed here is a burden to the state with millions of dollars having to be spent conducting an entirely duplicative census of our own citizens that would further
accurate census, yes.
Which would, when conducted.
You know, I spent hours on the phone in the past few days talking to families really impacted by the potential cuts to disability services in our state. So please don't talk to me so callously about budget cuts.
You mean how Katie Hobbs overspent the budget?
Yeah, I know you want to use every opportunity to attack the executive, but we're not here to do that. We're here to talk about
Senator Kuby. You just brought
it's QB, like quarterback. QB.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Jake's apparently a big fan of talk shows on Fox News because that's what he treats his committee like. He's just ready to let it rip anytime someone else other than him is talking. Oh, but if a woman interrupts him, that's a no-no.
We don't speak when other members are explaining their vote.
Mr. Chair, if you are putting words in our mouth during your vote explanation.
Senator Sunderation, you are out of line and out of order.
No one interrupts the bollocking! Off with our head! Guards! Guards! Guards!
Yes, it seems Jake's fine interrupting the hell out of women, but the moment they interrupt him, it becomes a federal crime. To finish off with Hoffman's ridiculous reason to embezzle funds into this farce of a project, let's get to the why of how Hoffman chose this citizen census method to move money from clean elections to whatever the hell this is.
I think you want...
Well, what occurred, I think we agree
as
on.
I'm interpreting your comments, please correct me if this is incorrect, you want non-citizens to be counted in terms of determining the representation for elected officials here at the Capitol, and by extension, I assume the U.S. Capitol as well. Is that incorrect?
Mr. Chair, I mean, it is absolutely correct because there are so many vital and needed services that are based off of census populations that contribute to not just redistricting for the purpose of elected representation, but also the ability for us to draw down and take federal dollars for needed services that people need in this state.
So
right?
let the record reflect then that you just said it was correct that you want non-citizens to be counted for representation.
That is, Mr. Chair, that is in fact the current interpretation of that clause in the Constitution that talks about counting the people in the United States. That is the job of the U.S. Census.
I do appreciate an honest Democrat.
You know, I'm a little surprised he didn't yell gotcha, he was so giddy. Aha! So you admit immigrants are people. You've fallen right into my trap. Hoffman wanted this little piece of theater so he could post it to his social media account and score internet points. So, good for you, Jake. You got 44,000 likes. Does that fill the empty void in your chest where your humanity should be? To flip this entirely on its head, I've said this is about the Clean Elections Commission and its funding. Which it is. So, since alpha male Jake Hoffman has asserted his dominance on so much of this by hating on immigrants and women, let's see how he does when he's questioned on the actual funding mechanism, stealing money from the Clean Elections Fund.
And Mr. Chair, obviously that's the policy framework you're coming from, that you feel that the Clean Elections funding might be better used in this context, but there's only 27...
To ensure accurate representation,
sure.
Yes, I think we should.
Sure. Okay, but moving on. There's only $27 million in the Clean Election Fund, so at a rate of sweeping this funding at $5 million per year, that's only $27 million that could be potentially swept from the Clean Election Fund for this effort.
Well, that's the current fund balance. It doesn't include annual contributions.
So you're planning to contribute a lot more somehow?
Okay. We're going to move on to testimony since you don't have any questions.
On this?
Yeah.
No, I was asking if you knew how much was in the fund.
Sure, 2 minutes.
Okay. But apparently not.
Okay.
Yeah, Hoffman had no answer when questioned by Senator Sundaration. He just cut off her questioning and moved on. This would bankrupt the Clean Election Commission, which is the point. And Hoffman wants to avoid talking about it because he wants to scream about evil immigrants while gutting the Clean Elections Commission. Why? Well, Republicans were the main opposition to the establishment of the Clean Elections Commission. They are the main reason the public funding of elections by the Clean Election Commission has failed. And what a shock, they are now trying to finish the job. The simple explanation is rich people like Republicans because Republicans do what they are told, and Republicans like rich people because rich people give them money. It's not the most complicated relationship. Now, that being said, there is a more personal reason for Hoffman to dislike the Clean Election Commission. You see, he's a rat fucker. For those of you uninitiated into the more esoteric political terms, it means a practitioner of the dark art of dirty tricks. What does that mean in this case? Well, for one thing, when this Navajos for Trump billboard went up, it was a lot less Navajos and a lot more for Trump, specifically this decided non-Navajo person for Trump. It means that Hoffman has literally had an academic paper written on a troll farm he operated to generate fake grassroots support for Donald Trump. It means that he has been indicted for trying to overturn the 2020 election result by pretending to be an elector. And it also means he was trying to pump up a practically anonymous Green candidate in the 2024 Senate election. Which the other stuff is fun, but this is probably the most important one. In the heat of the 2024 Senate election in Arizona, Jake Hoffman, who was running for re-election, took time out of his own campaign to throw an absolute shit fit over the Green Party candidate not getting invited to the Senate debate. Which, why? The Democratic and Republican candidates both got, respectively, hundreds of thousands of votes in the primary. The Green Party candidate didn't get enough votes to fill a high school gym. The reason that the Green Party candidate didn't get invited was the same reason my pet rock didn't get invited. They both had no chance of winning and no actual support. Don't take this personal. I love you, Stone Phillips. Jake got really worked up over this and made a big stink about it online and sent a couple letters. Acted real threatening, and I think we can all guess why. Jake wanted to drain support from the Democratic candidate by supporting a candidate that would peel off voters. In this case, the Green candidate. There was a fun addendum to this incident. A metric ton of campaign mailers in favor of the Green Party candidate and against the Democratic Party candidate got sent out right before the election. Which, the Green Party candidate didn't even form a candidate committee as far as I can tell, so it wasn't him. If only there was someone we knew of with a long track record of dirty tricks. Anyway, if the Green Party candidate had been forced into the debate, this might have actually flipped the outcome of the election. I bet the anonymous whoever who put all that money and effort into that untraceable campaign would be really angry about the Green Party candidate being excluded from that debate. I bet they'd even try to destroy the Clean Elections Commission the first chance they got. Oh gosh, I've gone off on a bit of an unrelated to anything tangent. My bad. Let's get back on topic with the census bill and one final objection from Minority Leader Senator Sundaration.
I think the important point here is that these initiatives are supposed to have their own funding mechanisms, and the chair, the sponsor, did rightly include some sort of funding mechanism in here, but that funding mechanism, based on sweeping $5 million from the Clean Elections Fund, is wholly inadequate to cover any significant portion of the cost that this effort would take. There's only $27 million in the Clean Elections Fund, and so that would be quickly exhausted and then leave no more money to be able to do anything that the Clean Elections Fund does or to even complete this effort. There's no resources or additional staff or employees provided for the IRC to do this. Another major point that we were not able to get to in the questioning or discussion is that this allows some sort of outside entity to conduct the census, but it doesn't describe how that would happen. How would we vet that organization? How do we know that it is that the entity chosen to conduct this duplicative census and, let's say, biased census would not be some sort of unvetted, not reputable organization that would be handed over this significant chunk of money to go around and potentially terrorize the people in the state of Arizona.
If you're thinking of this from a policy perspective, this is just all sorts of weird. The census, unnecessary. The funding, inadequate. But on top of that, outsourcing it is very suspicious. It's almost like they are planning to hand over this massive chunk of change to some random Republican vendor. Now, a redistricting of legislative districts does not depend on this bogus census. The bill has an escape hatch written into it. If the state census doesn't go off, just use the national one. But it should be indicative of how much faith Hoffman has in this, that he actually included a clause that says, when it fails, just use the federal one. It's almost like all that rhetoric about Arizona needing a separate census because of all the evil foreigners skewing elections was bullshit. I started with the idea that the purpose of a system is what it does. This bill does not and cannot create the conditions under which a statewide census of Arizona could be undertaken. It is woefully underfunded. Any census conducted by any organization will most likely be inadequate and have to be set aside. What it does do is defund the Clean Elections Commission. Beyond that, it seems to route the money to functionally unqualified groups to conduct the census. If you don't believe me, Google cyber ninjas. This bill and this attempt must be rejected by the Arizona legislature and the Arizona people. Republicans should keep their hands out of Arizona taxpayers' pockets. I'm History Sock, and I'll see you at the next committee hearing.